Hello, and welcome to another fully live episode of Hacking with Friends. My name is Kody Kinzie. I am a security researcher at Varonis, and today we are back with a Q&A episode to answer any of your hacking-related questions and also talk a little bit about the hacking stuff that I have been working on. It's good to see everyone again. You can see we've actually got a new set. Everything has been redone, so looks pretty cool if I don't say so myself. And yeah, it's good to see everyone. In fact, let me bring the chat back on. Where are you, chat? There we are. Hello. So, I've been gone for a little bit now, like partially due to the Hackaday SuperCon travel. And then when I got back, I got some bad news with family. My father passed away. And while we weren't super close, it still had a lot of work that had to be done with that. And then also, just kind of digging into someone like after they've passed, like if you weren't that close to them, is an interesting experience, especially if you're an OSINT investigator. I found out that I can still purchase shoes from a website that he owns. So it's a little strange. But anyway, so I am back now, and I have been working on a couple IoT projects to kind of keep me busy, like during this whole thing. Whenever I have something unpleasant happen, I often work on a couple relatively simple projects that can give me a feeling of progress without really requiring too much commitment while, everything's all up in the air. So I have been working on a couple interesting things that actually taught me more about IoT devices than I've learned in the last several years. So I wanted to share a little bit about what I've learned personally about making IoT devices that last a really long time, because it's not as straightforward as you would think. So I created this little guy right here over the last week or so. This is a design that I got off Thingiverse, but the internals are something that I kind of pieced together from information on the internet and observation. So if I open it up, and I'll show a picture more clearly soon, there's a couple of microcontrollers. There's a temperature sensor, there is a Wi-Fi enabled microcontroller, and then there is a solar regulator. And there's not really much else in there. But I've been working on this design for about a week, just in my spare time, improving it and getting things up and running. And it's really cool. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what I learned about making both a solar powered device and then also making a device that's designed to last for a very long time. And then I also want to talk a little bit about the class that I did in Missoula. So this is these are some of the events that I've done in Missoula. I am lucky enough to have some really great support at the Missoula Library, where they have been able to provide these classes for free. So basically, grant funding is able to pay for the ability for a bunch of students to come and do all this for free. So the classes are at no cost, and they're always sold out. So we just did this one over the weekend. I was able to make it back and get here. Let's see. Oh, does it not show the details now that it's passed? I hope it does. It hides the details now. Okay, well, I'm here to tell you about it, so that's all right. So this class was my favorite, not just for the fact that there is a Wi-Fi nugget just looming over the city of Missoula. I mean, like, obviously the class is going to be a big deal, but like it's a little imposing. But yeah, so this class was a Wi-Fi self-defense class. And basically I took all of the nasty Wi-Fi hacking things you can do with an ESP8266 microcontroller, and I made a class around it so people could basically try taking a swing at their own devices and see whether or not they stood up. So this class was fun because we got to just kind of show the kind of information that was leaking from people's phones up on a screen. So there were some people who had been traveling recently who basically had their whole travel itinerary splash up on the screen because of the hotels, because of sites they'd seen, or because of airlines or airports they'd connected to. We were able to connect the dots between a couple people's travels and what their phones were spraying out constantly. So this was a super fun class. I'm going to probably make some short form like TikTok or like other videos around what we talked about, but we basically covered 5 different things. We covered, let's see, I have to remember them now in order. So first thing was fox hunting. How do you track down a suspicious Wi-Fi device and actually figure out where it is? So your neighbor's stealing your Wi-Fi, or you check into an Airbnb and there's a weird Wi-Fi network device that like could be a camera, like, and you want to find out where it is. That's what the first technique was for. The second one was beacon swarming. So it was basically creating a whole bunch of fake Wi-Fi networks in order to trick phones into revealing they'd been there before. And this really works well against VIPs or organizations where it might be a sensitive, business, and somebody could detect all these sensitive people's devices by just looking for networks that they'd joined in the past, and creating fake versions of them to lure devices into connecting. So that was a lot of fun. We also did Wi-Fi phishing, so creating man-in-the-middle Wi-Fi networks that ask for your password. We covered, let's see. Oh my God. That's getting hard to remember them. I need to practice again. Oh, malicious QR codes. So we also covered creating a QR code that has a Wi-Fi network that is hidden, and that makes it so that your phone constantly broadcasts that name over and over and over. So yeah, anyway, that's just a high-level overview of the class. If you didn't know that those things were possible, let me know, and maybe I will cover them more on this stream. So, all right, we got a question. This is a Q&A, and I do need to prove that this is live. So John Doe, I have several Apple products. Should I get a new MacBook for hacking, or should I just buy an x64 laptop for studying hacking? So I have a MacBook Pro, and I've had this for, I think this is like a 2019, 2018 MacBook Pro. And it's an Intel, and it works pretty well. Honestly, like things are compiled for it. Like it enjoys, I would say, great support. But it is getting old. Like I couldn't start the stream today on time because it wouldn't turn on. And I've tried to get this fixed. And as a result, I have a replacement Mac that is an Apple Silicon Mac. It's really beefy, but it is super locked down. And almost everything I do triggers like a SOC alert, and I get locked out of my accounts, and I'm afraid to touch it now. So I will say that this new MacBook has pretty decent support. I haven't tried to do everything because I'm frankly not allowed to do a lot on it. However, for like AI and things like that, it does work really great. And one of the things that I shouted out on a previous stream that I will probably want to shout out again is, let me see if I can pull it up, Pinocchio.computer. This is something where I do a lot of research now with AI models, or rather like I'm using a lot of AI models because I want to stay up on them. So getting them spun up and running is frankly kind of a pain. But some of these I see featured, on social media. I see people using them in interesting ways, and I want to try them out. Like Stable Diffusion, obviously, like some of these other ones. Whisper is a transcription service offered by OpenAI, and this is a local web UI version of it. I've been using tools like this that are extremely well supported on the new like M1, M2 MacBooks. And I'm finding that a lot of the AI stuff is specifically compiled for like the newer MacBooks, because that's kind of the alternative to, just having a really beefy like PC. So to answer your question, it depends on what you're going to be focused on. If you're focused on like AI stuff, or if you're interested, then the new MacBooks like really do seem to have a lot of good support for a lot of these AI tools. It's pretty encouraging to see. But if you're doing general security work where you're spinning up virtual machines and whatnot, then like I would say the Intel ones were pretty solid. And instead, I would look into something like a cheap ThinkPad, which is what I do. So I have a ThinkPad that I do. For all I love this computer that's hosting the stream right now, it cannot compile to Arduino right now. Like there's just something wrong with it. It just can't do it. There's like a critical bug, and my Python installation is destroyed. So I have a separate ThinkPad I use for IoT and electronics development, and I use it for all sorts of stuff. I have Windows on it, I have Linux on it, and I really do enjoy it as a tool. There's a couple of quirky things with it because I got it for like $300 on eBay. So like some of the buttons don't work and whatnot, but I found that to be a good low-cost solution for me, provided I don't want to run these very, very resource-hungry AI tools. So that's my take on it. It depends on what you're researching. Yeah, and AI tools for me have been a big priority, so that's why I've been enjoying the new laptop that I got. All right, so what was I talking about? Oh, right. Yeah, anyway, let's move on, and I want to talk a little bit about making IoT devices. So I don't know if I talked about when I was at the Hackaday SuperCon, the tunnel screamer that I made. So this is something where I really enjoy I really enjoy street art, and in Los Angeles, the storm drain tunnels have a lot of great street art there. And I thought, because so many people go in these things, it would be kind of funny to leave behind a device that detects a flashlight and then, just screams into the darkness. So that spawned a project at Hackaday SuperCon. I hosted an event called the Meow Mixer, and several of the other attendees jumped in and helped me kind of figure out this project and make it better. And that got me into making IoT, like low power devices that are meant to sleep or stay dormant for a very long period of time, and then kind of power back up and do something. So while initially I had something that wasn't reporting back any data at all, it was just designed to be, let's just call it an art project. I decided to get more into some of these other projects that require either solar power or something to sleep and require almost no energy for a very long time. So I frequently work with microcontrollers like the ESP8266. That's my kind of my go-to. I now work with the S2 Mini a lot as well, which is an ESP32S2. And those microcontrollers are great because they can be used in IoT products, but I usually have them plugged in. I don't often run them off the battery. So battery saving is not really something that I've looked into before because it's not really relevant to me. I don't use batteries for a lot of projects. So getting into this, I started to learn about the particulars of these microcontrollers and how to actually make them consume the amount of power that they need on like a very, very low level. So they still are able to function, but they're able to trim lots and lots of power off of places that frankly, I don't need it. For example, I don't need a stable internet or like Wi-Fi connection to power on every 5 minutes and send a piece of data. I can have it sleep basically that entire amount of time and save a lot of power versus being on and transmitting that entire time. So there's also a way to transmit data that doesn't really require any backend programming. And this is something that if you can do it for free, I think makes these sorts of projects a lot more fun. So let me show you one of my favorite things I found, Adafruit IO. So Adafruit IO is something where you can very, very easily like slap some sensors together. I used ChatGPT to help me write code that broadcast to a feed. And if you're a nerd, this is an MQTT feed where basically the microcontroller is waking up and sending information. And then it is being collected and graphed by Adafruit IO. I can download all of this information. And you can also do all sorts of cool hacker stuff with it. So I'm going to be making a video that I think is like Adafruit IO for hackers soon. But just imagine the possibilities of, you know, a really simple API where you put in your API key, you put in the information that you want to transmit, and then boom, it shows up and it actually gets graphed. So I'm going to take a look at the, let's take a look at the humidity. All right, so this is the humidity that's been going, oh, let's see, it's been going for some time. So right now, the last check-in was at 122. That's basically right now. So, okay, so we have a value of 94, and this is all kind of graphed nicely for us to see here. I can download this as a CSV or JSON format file. And this is really cool because it means that I can also access this data from another device. So imagine this. Let's say that I have a sensor that's outside, that's in my solar enclosure, and it is reporting back maybe every 10 minutes if I really wanted to conserve battery. I can also have a device indoors that's connected to Wi-Fi that's looking at the Adafruit IO feed, and anytime a new temperature gets published or new humidity value gets published, it updates a screen. So I can kind of stitch things together without them being directly connected by doing this, provided I can put something like a microcontroller outside and have it get a Wi-Fi connection. I can build things that are basically plug and play and only take like 10 or 15 minutes to get to the point that they're able to transmit data. Now, let's say I'm a hacker and I'm a spy and I want to be able to see when someone's home. Well, I also made a version of this that was able to tell me if someone's device was present, and if so, what the signal strength was for that device. So I could basically tell when they were close to the device, far away, and then not present at all. So Adafruit IO has a lot of different, let's just say hacker applications if you get creative enough. Let's see, what's my favorite color? Red. That was really simple to answer. It's fun to have this Q&A, guys. Yeah, so if you can think of a cool and creative way of using a microcontroller that has Wi-Fi to either attach an external sensor or use the built-in Wi-Fi to do a scan, detect devices, and then basically report back to a server about whether they're there or not, you can make a presence sensor for specific devices. And as like a spooky Wi-Fi kind of person, that's really interesting to me. You know, like if I could create a presence sensor with one of these microcontrollers and then have it last for a very long time and have it reporting back to something like Adafruit IO, that means that there's a lot I can do. So I'm really pleased by this, honestly. Like I'm super, super excited that this is working so well, and being able to do things like graph the battery so I can see how quickly it discharges. I've said this many times, but I'm using batteries that I basically found out of discarded like single-use vapes. So they don't have any recharge circuitry. So I basically have to wire them back up, which is a little dangerous. One of them got very puffy, but I don't really know, how long they last for. They have like 300 milliamp hours. They're these skinny little vape batteries, and this is basically a discharge graph showing me exactly when it stopped working. And I honestly, guys, I don't know, this is right around the time I was handling it. So if I just caused a short right here and it just burned through the last of the battery, that would actually make a lot of sense because I touched it literally right then. But it was already, I don't know. It seems like I might have done something there. But anyways, this is just one way that you can visualize data for free and with very little code. And what's cool about Adafruit.io as well is they have a way of generating a file that already has your API credentials in it. So if you just want to plug in one of their kind of pre-prescribed, let me see, one of their pre-prescribed devices, I have 2 devices set up, you can basically generate a piece of firmware that you drag and drop onto the device, and it sets it up and begins reporting back data. So you can do this with 0 code. I'm using code because I'm basically like doing this all hacky. But I would say like the limits that are imposed on the free version of Adafruit.io is like you can only report back like 60 times per minute or something, or something like that. It's like a very, very like reasonable amount of free reports you get. So anyway, that's how I've been visualizing the data and reporting back data for these IoT projects. Let's talk about power. So when I look this up, there's always like this one schematic that gets shown over and over and over. And it's always using, Pinterest. It's always using this little LiPo charging board right here. So I'm not going to say I'm an electrical engineer. I'm an electrical enthusiast. Let's go with that. There's a lot lower of a burden there. And since I'm working with the D1 Mini, this is correct. I was really interested to see that this kept popping up over and over. Everybody is using this LiPo charging like battery thing in order to manage the solar panel. In fact, even my professor, like back when I was making basic projects like this, was telling me that I needed something like this to manage the battery, and that maybe it wasn't ideal, but it would get the job done. So if you look up, ESP8266 or D1 Mini, like solar charging kit, like you get this over and over and over. In fact, I think I did a search right before this. I keep seeing this solar LiPo thing. Here's another one, like over and over again. So I was like, why does this feel wrong? Like, I don't know that this is correct. And thankfully, I figure there are some nerds here that can correct me if I'm wrong. And frankly, like I'm throwing myself on the mercy of the internet here by even taking a stance. And that's by design. I really want to figure out what's going on here. But this is the schematic I keep seeing over and over, and this is why I don't like it. Okay, so in our setup here, the D1 Mini, the ESP8266 development board here that has all this great stuff already pre-installed and pins ready to be plugged into, this runs at 3.3 volts. So it can accept a 5-volt like plug-in right here, and it has a voltage regulator built in to step that down to 3.3 volts, which is safe for the chip. So this chip runs at 3.3 volts, and this board, you can basically just plug a 5-volt USB cable into it, and it will step down that voltage to 3.3 volts. But this is a wasteful process. It generates heat, it burns voltage unnecessarily. So that voltage regulator is basically designed to make this easier to plug in to like power, like main power. It is not designed to be efficient for solar, for example. So I was just like, why are we doing this when, frankly, like there are other boards available that allow us to output the correct voltage, and we could plug that basically directly into the microcontroller on this 3.3 volt pin. So here's the conundrum. This will take solar energy and it will step it up to whatever the voltage is that the battery needs. I think the battery takes 3.7 volts. So that is actually a safe voltage to run on the 3.3 volt pin. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I've been doing it and it's still not dead. Maybe it'll die in the future, but I've seen people say that this is okay and it seems fine. So I'm able to basically plug this battery directly into the 3.3 volt pin, and that's okay. That will run just fine without needing this to step it up to 5 volts, feed it into the 5 volt pin, and then have the regulator step it back down to 3.3 volts. We're basically taking 3 volts, stepping it up to 5 volts, sending it over, stepping it down to 3 volts, and then sending it to the. Why are we doing that? It just doesn't seem necessary. So when I saw some people sharing their experiences, these people shared like blog posts and other interesting information about like how to kind of minimize the power. And they said that this voltage regulator is really going to burn up a lot of power constantly. As long as it is connected, it is always going to be burning up power. So my first design died very, very quickly because this thing was plugged directly into 5 volts. And it wasn't really actually effectively managing power. So that's the first thing I learned is I needed to ignore a lot of the schematics that I found online because they were violating basic things I knew about like how this stuff works. So let me show off a more detailed picture of what my design looks like. And all right, here it is. So this is what I put together. This is, well, let me zoom in. Let's see. Please. No, of course. Yes, it will. Okay. So I'm using this solar regulator. And what this does is it takes a solar input right here, and this can go up to 6 volts. And I have 2 solar panels over here wired in parallel. And what that means is that these solar panels wired in parallel are basically doubling the current, but they're keeping the voltage exactly the same. So these are like 5-volt solar panels. So that should keep them perfectly within the limit of what this can deal with. So that power comes in here and is distributed to the battery. And the battery, as I said, is this tiny little single-use vape battery that I extracted from e-waste. So this is just a free battery that was going to the landfill that I'm just kind of experimenting with. And as you can see, it's quite small. Now, I also have this D1 Mini that is plugged via I2C, and this is a really sweet little Grove connector, like quick connect cable. So it's a quick connect cable between the D1 Mini and the temperature sensor. So this is sensing the temperature and the humidity. And when this queries, it comes back with a value, and then this transmits it over Wi-Fi. So this is a pretty simple design. Like there's not really a lot fancy going on. I even did a little bit of cable management. But the last thing I wanted to talk about is actually keeping an eye on this. So how do we actually monitor like what the battery is going to be? Because it's kind of tricky, you know, like being able to see how quickly this is discharging. We can't actually put this voltage directly on the pin that's capable of sensing voltage because it can only sense, let's see, it can only be exposed up to 1 volt. And after that, it starts to be unreliable or you can damage it. So what we have to do is build what's called a voltage divider. So the final step in this, almost the final step in this was figuring out how to build a voltage divider. So a voltage divider allows us to put the voltage of the pin directly onto, and this is the voltage divider itself right here. We take a resistor, we then connect this lead over to our analog in pin, and then we take the second resistor and connect it to ground. And what that does is allow us to measure the voltage in a safe way and sense any changes in voltage immediately. And with just a little bit of multiplication, we can figure out what the actual voltage of the battery is, because this should step down the voltage to like 1 volt, but it'll be still sensitive to changes because it's draining to ground. So this is a way that we can build something that allows us to sense a voltage. Like you can technically monitor the voltage on a car battery using the same method with a voltage divider. The value of the resistors would just be different. So if you're looking to do a project that monitors the voltage of a battery and you're using an ESP8266 baseboard like this, like the D1 Mini, then you can plug it directly into the AO pin, provided you create a voltage divider first. So this was cool. I hadn't known about this before, and being able to monitor the voltage is what was able to give me this graph in my feeds that I already showed you. Sorry, wait. There we go. So by creating a voltage divider, I was able to watch this battery go down and down and down until it dipped below a useful level. And even though I'm pretty sure either my resistor values are wrong, or as someone was just telling, as my friend Aria was just telling me, these D1 minis actually already have a voltage divider built in. So I might need to adjust my values to make it so that this actually goes to something that makes sense. Because frankly, like there's no way that this microcontroller was running at like 1.1 volts. Like that doesn't make sense at all. So something's a little off here, but still we're getting the data, and based on that we can adjust or correct it based on that information. So that's how you can build an IoT project that is solar connected and reports back to a dashboard for free, kind of a speed run through what I've learned. But there is one other thing that I did not mention. And that thing is, let me pull it up, deep sleeping. So deep sleep is a feature that allows microcontrollers to, let me type this in. That allows microcontrollers to consume as little power as possible. Yes, okay. One of my favorite educators on the ESP8266 or just microcontrollers in general is Random Nerd Tutorials. I love these people so much. Like, I think that they do such great work, and explaining how deep sleep works is an excellent example of some of the education that they've done. So in Arduino, you can do something called ESP Deep Sleep. And let me tell you why my Tunnel Screamer project is already dead. So in that code, I was using CircuitPython, and CircuitPython doesn't let you do deep sleep. It lets you just sleep. And because I was both plugged into the 5-volt pin, which as I mentioned before is wasteful, and also was just sleeping and not deep sleeping, that meant that I was drawing a significant amount more power than necessary. So that project, no matter how big the battery is already dead, unfortunately. Now, if I want to prevent this, then I can send the microcontroller into a really deep sleep. And there's a couple different ways to wake it up. And that was really important to my project because it turns out I was writing code that put it to sleep and then wasn't giving it away to actually wake up again. So here's a little breakdown of the difference between modem sleep, which is basically around like the Wi-Fi or internet connectivity, light sleep, and deep sleep. The current can go down to like 20 picoamps. And then that compared to modem sleep is 15 milliamps and 0.4 milliamps. This is a huge improvement. Like it really, really like means that you can exist for a lot longer if you're able to put it down into this mode. But when it's in this mode, a microcontroller is so asleep that it's not able to do a lot of the important things that it might need to do. And that could cause problems. And it did. It did cause problems. So, yes. So, Steve says that for measuring a battery, he runs a 180K resistor between VIN and AO. There's math after that. Yeah, I know. I made ChatGPT do the math, and that's probably why it's not working. Because I imagine that it didn't factor in the existing voltage divider that's in the D1 Mini. Because that was, I see confusing reports about that on the internet. So if I can't get a good conclusion based on the internet information out there, then it definitely can't. Another question is, what is the ESP8266 doing? Packet sniffing? Yes, actually. So for the version that I made, for the Adafruit IO version I made, it was waking up out of deep sleep. It was then doing a packet scan for a certain amount of time and looking for a specific device, so a device that's known to us. And then it was measuring the signal strength average over that period of time and reporting it back to Adafruit IO. So what that means is I was able to figure out if a device was present and whether or not that device was close by. And this should work on both the ESP32S2 and the ESP8266. The one that I wrote was for the ESP32S2. I just like that microcontroller. It's cool. And it can do good packet sniffing, and we can write like filters for it in CircuitPython, which is why I was doing it that way. But that was a very good question. Yes, doing packet sniffing and then using Adafruit IO is a really good idea. The only problem though is that when you try to do it, it has, hold on, we're not talking about this anymore. When you try to have a microcontroller like this, do packet sniffing and then connect to the internet over Wi-Fi and then send information and then go back and start packet sniffing again, there's a whole like setup and tear down of like a Wi-Fi radio instance that needs to happen that seems like a little complicated or unclear, or like it's leaving stuff over. That kind of made the project kind of difficult to do. So if you're looking to do something that's like packet sniffing and then using Adafruit IO to send data back and graph it, that's actually a super legitimate thing to do, because there's lots of interesting Wi-Fi things you can do with a built-in board. I want your imagination to run wild, because mine certainly is. But yeah, the problem is managing the Wi-Fi radio. It can get really confused and cause it to fail to connect over and over and over again. And I had a lot of frustration with trying to use a microcontroller like this for packet sniffing and then simultaneously like sending it to Adafruit IO. The screen on this was actually really useful for debugging. So that was nice, and I was able to figure out the problem eventually. But yeah, managing the Wi-Fi radio is the biggest challenge if you're going to be building like an Adafruit IO project that involves packet sniffing. But totally possible. Presence sensors, figuring out whether a rogue device is present, alerting you if it sees certain types of packets, like Adafruit IO, like telling you if it's seeing deauthentication, all completely possible with any microcontroller that has a built-in Wi-Fi radio, especially the ESP32S2 and the ESP8266. So that's a really good question. Yes, running wild. So let's continue to talk about deep sleep. So this is, again, a way that you can make it so your microcontroller could last for potentially a year on a single battery by sleeping anytime that it's not doing anything. But when we go into a state that is this deep of a sleep, there's basically only a couple things running. There's like a little timer, and there is a pin that is waiting for voltage. So for example, we could trigger a wake up via something. One thing we proposed for the tunnel project was we could have a MOSFET that opens up voltage onto the wake up pin anytime that it senses light on a light dependent resistor. So if the light dependent resistor like turns on as soon as it receives voltage, as soon as it receives light, and then that wakes up the microcontroller. A more practical example is using the built-in timer. So if you don't have a sensor that's turning this thing on, you can instead set a timer, and what that timer will do is basically fire voltage on a certain pin. I think it's GPIO 16, general purpose input output 16, and that, if connected to the wake up pin, will wake it back up. So if we're sending this thing into sleep, we need to be able to wake it up again, right? Otherwise, it just kind of hangs out there and it is sleepy. But if we connect this pin with the wake pin, so if we connect, I think it's in this case it's using GPIO 16 to the reset or wake pin, then when we tell the microcontroller it's time to wake up, it will automatically fire a pulse onto the reset pin and will basically restart itself. So we've shut it down so low that it needs to basically restart in order to wake back up. But that's perfectly fine. We can write code that kind of obeys those rules and makes it so that this is a super low power, very long endurance kind of project. So again, I'm using a different ESP8266 development board, but it's the exact same chip. This one just has more pins available. Frankly, I don't like it. I much prefer the D1 Mini. However, the principle is exactly the same. You can send the microcontroller to sleep. It'll save an absolute ton of power. And then whenever you tell it to wake up, it'll pulse a little pulse on GPIO 16. And then if you have connected it via a wire to the reset button, it will actually wake it back up. Isn't that crazy? So yeah. So that is something that you can do to create something like my little project, which again, if you want to see it, is right here. This is, you can't really see it, but the GPIO 16 is connected to the reset pin over here. So it's set to wake itself up after, I think it's set to every 5 minutes. We have the voltage divider, which is going, see this wire right here? Actually, there we go. So this is the voltage divider is coming from the positive terminal of the battery. It's going into a resistor, which is tucked away right here, which then connects right back here to the AO pin. And that is reading the voltage and telling us how far the battery has discharged. We have a solar panel here, two solar panels, sorry, that are connected in parallel. So you can see 3 wires all coming together and then leading into this solar charger unit. So this both manages the battery, protects against over voltage, it protects against under voltage, so it won't feed too little voltage to the microcontroller. It'll actually cut it off at a certain point. And overall, this is a system that will both report back its own battery, sleep for a very long time and draw very little current when needed, and should allow this to run for, I'm hoping anyway, an indefinite period of time with the right size battery. Now, this battery is wimpy. I'm going to be replacing it with a larger one. But as you can see, if you want to make an IoT project, this could also be a Wi-Fi sensor. It could be connected to virtually any type of sensor that you want. This is a project I made, over the last week in my spare time, just to kind of keep my mind occupied. But these components total cost about, if you get them on AliExpress, maybe $10, $12. So yeah, if you've been putting off trying this sort of thing, now is absolutely the time to try it. Adafruit.io lets you do this for free with no code whatsoever if you don't want to. But ChatGPT also can put together code that will publish to Adafruit.io. You just need to be mindful of some of the particulars of this stuff. And of course, again, deep sleep is your friend. If you haven't tried it out before, you can make things that you can plug into a battery that will wait for a long time, wake up, and use virtually no power. So if you wanted to make something that just screams randomly whenever you want, that would actually probably not be that long, that much code, and would last for a very, very long time. So if you've ever heard of, I think it's called the Eviltron or the Annoyatron, I imagine they are very, very familiar with deep sleep in order to make that last for a super long period of time. All right, so some questions. Why using Python? C++ is much faster and more efficient, especially if we try optimizing for power efficiency. You are 100% right. CircuitPython isn't even able to properly use deep sleep mode on this. And that is why my project that is sitting in the tunnels is dead, is because it was using sleep and not deep sleep. Now, the reason why I prefer using CircuitPython to C++ or Arduino is mostly because of my own experience. I'm much more experienced with Python. I'm not good at math. And frankly, I use AI to troubleshoot my code a lot, and I can tell whether it's gaslighting me in Python. Sometimes I don't know enough C++, or I haven't practiced enough of it recently to be able to tell when the AI is lying to me or doing something that's like kind of improbable, because it's like using data structures that I don't really use. So because I'm less of a computer scientist and I'm more towards the electrical side of things, I'm, as I said, an electrical enthusiast, one might say. I prefer to work with code that's easy to understand, especially if I'm going to be turning around and sharing it with other people. So my types of prototypes will be like, even though I can make like a big and fancy thing over the course of a week that really does everything, I would rather do a simple proof of concept that anybody can use and make it more accessible rather than perform better. So I've had to get over that a little bit when working with IoT products. Like when I'm, well, projects, we'll say, because this is all open source stuff. But when I'm making an IoT sort of design, like this really has to be power efficient if it's going to run off this little like old vape battery. If I'm going to be scavenging e-waste to make projects off of, I cannot afford to just use Python anymore. So that's why AI code review and being able to do iterations and like track down errors or write test code to track down problems with ChatGPT has been pretty central to me using some of these more advanced features. So basically, yeah, like I am more familiar with Python. I've been hesitant to work with code that I don't understand because I don't know if I'm getting good advice when I'm using AI tools to fix it. And it's only been recently that I've been forced to just like get over it and try it out and see what works and what doesn't work. And I've been pretty pleased. Like ChatGPT 4 has been excellent at being able to write test code to find electrical problems or determine if it's like basically what's at fault. Like it's able to help me very, very quickly write short, like diagnostic piece of codes that figure out what the issue is. And that was really like one of the things that prevented me from doing C++ before, was because I can write test code in Python quickly, and I can't write test code in C++ as quickly because it requires more pre-planning, and it's just a bigger cognitive load, frankly. Like I'll get distracted and just, I'll get discouraged because something's not working in my test code when there's a problem I haven't even fixed in my main code. So I would say, yeah, that's really it. Is C++ is harder, but obviously it's better. It's going to perform faster, and it's going to be more power efficient. So your point is an excellent one. Yes, Poca MOSFET with 0.7 volts. Yeah, so if we wanted to make something that wakes up a microcontroller in response to something like light, a flashlight, for example, then we could use a MOSFET, poke it with a little bit of voltage, and it should open up and reset the microcontroller and let it do its screaming fit or whatever it's going to do. Or if you're just too lazy to make your own C library, talking from personal experience. Yeah. Yes. So the biggest difference I would say between the two programming languages for people working with microcontrollers is the availability of libraries. You've got like three levels here, and I'm simplifying a bit, but this is like what most people will run into. You've got Arduino, which is like the hardest. It's going to require the most investment in terms of like planning your programs. And it's just like the Wild West. Like there's libraries for everything. People commit libraries like crazy. And most of them, well, I'm not going to say most of them, a lot of them don't work, but they're there. You can find a library for anything. So like that whole world is a bit complicated. It's a bit convoluted. It's discouraging for beginners. But I mean, there's something for everything. And if you know enough to be able to distinguish the good resources from the bad resources, then you can actually get a lot done with Arduino. The next step is MicroPython. Still a lot of control and still kind of hard, honestly, for a Python-based language. Setting this up is not as straightforward, and getting it working requires a bit more knowledge of command line tools or the desire to be a developer. However, once you get it working, it can do things that CircuitPython, the next level up, can't do. It allows you to, for example, arbitrarily write to a disk and then allow the program to write to a disk, whereas CircuitPython strictly locks that down and forces you to format your entire programming around design choices that they made about who can write to the disk. Kind of a difference, because one of them choices are made for you, that's CircuitPython, and then another, MicroPython, is more flexible, but frankly, like maybe like might not be as beginner friendly. And then at the very top, we have CircuitPython, drag and drop, beginner friendly, supports most of the projects that I want to do, but some of the design choices limit me and make it so that I just frankly can't do things that I would require to, I would consider to be meeting the requirements of a finished prototype. So those are the three languages I see people making choices between, and that is why I think people make the choice between MicroPython, which the recent Hackaday SuperCon badge was MicroPython. So from the community of nerds, they were using MicroPython badges because, frankly, it's easier to write, and because it is interpreted, you can make changes live and experiment with them. Like you don't have to pre-compile everything. There's a lot of advantages for using Python and microcontrollers, and I would say compilation is probably the biggest one. I can take a CircuitPython or MicroPython project to any computer, plug it in, open up the USB drive, make changes to the code, and save it, and it will run. And I cannot say the same thing about an Arduino device. So that kind of brittleness when it comes to, you got to set up your IDE, you got to have the right microcontroller installed, like a lot of people don't expect that anymore. So having an interpreted language running on the microcontroller certainly has a lot of benefits for people who want to just plug this thing in, write some code or drag and drop some code and have it work. That kind of expectation for a microcontroller to be that plug and play and that beginner friendly is new. And frankly, like people that work with microcontrollers or have for a long time are used to being more focused on the performative, like, is it the fastest? Is it the most efficient? So this kind of like tension between those two worlds is, again, new and a result of these microcontrollers that are cheap, powerful, and offer a lot of features that are very, very beginner friendly. So it's a good time to be a developer when it comes to microcontrollers. If I can make, an IoT project purely to distract myself like over the course of the week, then I think that it's very possible for a lot of people who haven't tried it before, or maybe have a little bit of experience with electronics but not programming, or a little bit of experience with programming but not electronics. I think that this could be an excellent first project for anybody that wants to try it out. So yeah, I really learned a lot. I think that this was cool. Just watching this stream, and then trying out the project for yourself, I think you would already know more than I did a week ago, and I considered myself to know a good amount a week ago. But yeah, you really don't know what you don't know until you try it. So I highly encourage this. As I said, this is like $15 of electronics to try this sort of stuff out. And while this is configured to be a temperature sensor, you can certainly turn it into all sorts of things like a Wi-Fi sniffer, and all of that. So yeah, really cool and super fun to work with these little microcontrollers. So this is an excellent question. How much does having the microcontroller and charger in the enclosed case affect the temperature reading? Significantly, depending on where you place it. So I found that if I place the microcontroller and this charging unit too close to this sensor, it will affect the readings by up to 2 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, obviously, that's not like crazy or anything, because the next best module that reads temperature actually has an error margin of over that, of like 2 degrees centigrade. So if 2 degrees centigrade is an acceptable error margin, then I would say like Fahrenheit 2 degrees, that's probably fine too. Now, the way that I position this is basically keeping the hottest elements away from the airflow. So my biggest concern is out here, there are incredibly strong storms that are going to be pouring in water at almost, the same angle as you see the light coming in here. So what I've done is I've positioned the sensor as low as possible to give it access to through like airflow. And then the idea is, as you can see from the light here, if rain is pouring in, it should just barely miss the active connections of this little temperature sensor right here. So assuming that the rain comes in here and the rain comes in here, this is about as low as I can place this. And it's very deliberate placement to make the hotter elements up here be able to kind of stay away from it. But obviously the goal here is just to have as much open airflow as possible so that the moving air is what is being measured and not the stale kind of stagnant air here. On a very still day, I would say that yes, like this kind of setup could affect everything up to a couple degrees. However, because I did all the steps that I talked about earlier, this is now the system out is plugged directly into the 3.3 volt pin. So the 5 volt regulator is not being used here. The only regulator that's really being used is to manage the solar voltage coming in. So on a hot day, this is going to generate a little bit of heat. This is going to generate a negligible amount of heat because it's actually powering down into deep sleep mode and only powers up and connects to Wi-Fi every 5 minutes. So I would say this is going to be a negligible source of heat. This is going to be a constant, and then this is not going to really generate any heat unless it's discharging quickly. So this setup, I think, is not to toot my own horn, but probably the least likely to interfere with temperature that I've created so far. The exception being I've made a different version where these two elements sit in the bottom and this sits at the top of like a bell, like a bunch of like screens that sit on top of each other basically. And the problem is like water gets in and drowns this microcontroller, and spiders like build nests around the top of this. And eventually the spiders and the water short out a pin or two, and then this whole thing stops working. That's like a 1-year problem though. My last sensor worked pretty well. So if I was going to redesign this, I would say like making a way to protect the microcontroller so it can sit away from the temperature sensor would be really great. But I think that this will probably be fine provided it's not an exceptionally still day. And even then, this is really doing the best I think we can do with this equipment. Here's a question. Doesn't CircuitPython compile? Is there a full-fledged high-level runtime? So let me explain a little bit about how CircuitPython works, because it's one of my favorite languages, and I think it is awesome. So am I in Chrome? No, that's Firefox. That's too bad. So if I were in Chrome, I could go to, I could go to the nugget.dev website, plug in a microcontroller, and then flash CircuitPython to it. And what that would do is, actually, hold on a second. Let me just pull up the installation page. I'll show you exactly how it works. All right, so CircuitPython, again, is a interpreted language for microcontrollers, and it's available for a broad variety of devices, pre-compiled and ready to go. This is the page for the S2 Mini, which is the beating heart of my very own USB nugget. And this allows us to download a pre-flash binary file, a bin file, that lets us flash it directly. Now, if we want, there's an alternative installation for this. There is like a UF2 bootloader we can flash to this, where all we need to do is drag and drop this UF2 file, and it will also install CircuitPython. I prefer to flash the bin file directly. The UF2 bootloader is cool. You can install like MicroPython and CircuitPython using the UF2 bootloader. It's kind of like the de facto way of doing this, but the bin file's offered, and frankly, like I like using that. So what happens is, all right, we have the chip, nothing's on it, right? We hold down the boot button and plug this in, and then we flash the .bin file using a website. It connects automatically, it flashes it, we're done. We unplug it, we plug it back in, or we just hit the reset button, and it will be loaded with CircuitPython. It'll load itself as a USB drive, and we'll be able to literally just go to that USB drive, open up our code.py file, and start programming. We could do this in a text editor. We could do this in basically whatever we want. So that's really sweet because it means that we don't need to compile again. we never compiled. We just downloaded a bin file, which was pre-compiled for us, flashed it to the microcontroller, and then boom, we have a USB drive with Python code on it that automatically restarts every time we save to it. We can disable that if we want to, but the point is that we're up and running with Python, and we could use Nano if we want to open up that Python code, change it, save it, and it runs. So there's no compilation. It's already a precompiled like binary for that specific device. And as I said, like pretty much every device you would want to use on this is supported and has a binary file that's automatically compiled for the most recent version of CircuitPython that you can just install that way. So I have also made it even easier by, let's see if I can pull this up, by having our team create the nugget.dev website, which automatically flashes CircuitPython and more. Let's see, do I have? Oh, I do. So I'm going to take a microcontroller I just happen to have in my hand. I'm going to plug it in while holding down the boot button, and it should be now in flashing mode. I'm going to connect it, and this will automatically detect which microcontroller it is. I'm going to select CircuitPython program, and when this is done, then CircuitPython is installed and I can start working with it immediately. So that's why this is so easy. It took me longer to explain the process of doing it than actually just flashing CircuitPython to this device. So as soon as it's done, I'm just going to hit the reset button. It's done. All right, and it now will, I imagine, let me see if I can pull this up. CircuitPython. All right. Sorry, just want to get this on the screen. There we go. All right, so now this has popped up. This is our CircuitPython device, and we have a boot out.txt. This is basically when it boots up, it sends a message, and if we want to see what that message is, like if there's an error or something, it'll be reported here. We can see the information for the board, the microcontroller, like all that, and also the version of CircuitPython. So this is 8.10. That's a little bit behind the most current version, so I should probably update that. Then we also have our code. So right now it just prints hello world, and we can access this over serial. So if we want to, we can see serial output. Yeah, there's just a ton of things we can do. And then also there's the settings.toml file. This has been superseded, I believe, by the secrets.txt file. But this gives information for it when it starts up about, like if there's any Wi-Fi credentials or whatever else. And this prevents you from accidentally committing secrets. So I accidentally commit secrets to GitHub sometimes. I've gotten a lot better about it. But one big problem with beginners is they don't keep their secret credentials, their API tokens, their Wi-Fi passwords, all that stuff. It doesn't stay in their code. They put it in their code, they upload it to GitHub, and then it's there and potentially exposed. So a better way of doing that is having a secrets.py file. This is a standard convention in CircuitPython, and that's another reason I like it, is it makes it easy to keep your secret tokens and credentials from being accidentally exposed by your example code. So, all right, that is my little demonstration into why CircuitPython doesn't involve compilation. Like I said, my computer, this one that I'm using right now, is broken for compiling to Arduino. And as a result, it makes it very difficult for me to work with microcontrollers. So I can use CircuitPython on this computer anyway, because it's just using a USB connection and serial connection. So the fact that I can't compile for whatever reason right now in Arduino, like some library is broken, doesn't really matter. I can continue to work with these microcontrollers and make prototypes regardless. And that's a big factor for a lot of people who might not either have the experience or equipment to always be able to compile a C++ program. So just one of the reasons why I use what I would consider to be a much more wasteful and restrictive language to do a lot of my prototypes in. It's just easy. It's just really easy to get them working. And frankly, you can use that code as a scaffolding to kind of build C++ code later if you like the idea. Hey, I've been watching you since Nullbyte. Yeah, that's cool. I'm actually, well, we'll see, but I'm considering talking to the people who are doing Nullbyte, right? Who own Nullbyte right now. So nothing to promise, nothing really to report yet, but we're having conversations. We'll see. I really like the Null Byte brand. As many of you know me as Null, and of course you are the Bytes. So if there was some opportunity to be able to make more Null Byte episodes, then that would be really cool. But yeah, all right. So we are a little bit over time, but I can still take a couple of questions. I had so much I wanted to talk about with IoT devices, power saving mode, all the tricky, cool things you can do with Adafruit IO. It was like a lot. I wish Flipper apps didn't have to be written in C for this reason. I want to make a few, but I'm scared to try to learn C. Yeah, it's discouraging, I would say, because there's so many compilation errors and other things in order to get something off the ground, and there's really no room for mistakes, I would say. CircuitPython is nice and MicroPython is nice because there's more room for mistakes and it's easier to get yourself set up. There's less, I would say, like tech debt necessary to like get up to speed or like troubleshoot a problem. So yeah, I would say a lot of people choose to compromise with MicroPython because it's a good middle ground between the two. So if you haven't tried it, that might be something that you might be interested in because it does allow you for a lot of freedom without necessarily locking you down the same way that CircuitPython does. Who is here since the OG Null Byte videos when only Null was host? I feel old. Yeah, so one of my trademarks was once I got the job as editor of the entire Null Byte website and channel, I got the ability to recruit new people. So I don't know if you guys know this, but one of the most popular videos on Hack 5, because we all came over from Hack 5, was my friend Nick talking about Google Dorks. So like if you look up Google Dorks, he's like one of the top results now. And also on Hack 5, it's like the second most watched video of all time. So some of the other co-hosts that I brought in have gone on to some pretty cool and interesting jobs. Like Nick has worked at NASA, like he's done lots of really cool stuff. So looking back and seeing all the hosts that have come after me is like, yeah, when we started out, it was just me. And then we tried a couple of people that maybe did 1 or 2 episodes and we found a couple of regular hosts. I'm hoping to do that again soon. So if you know someone who's been wanting to make cybersecurity content, let us know. All right, so here's a question. I'm trying to host something that to receive MQTT data locally. What would be a simple/easy solution? So like I have been hacking this problem by basically just having one device subscribe to my Adafruit IO feed. So since I have sensor data that's being sent to Adafruit IO, it's really easy to publish a feed so that other devices can subscribe to it and draw down that data. So I would say if you haven't, I've been talking about Adafruit IO a lot, but if you want to, or if you're having like some trouble with like 2 MQTT devices communicating, then having a broker like Adafruit IO do it for you, or at least provide like the feed that they can both either publish or subscribe to. It's pretty easy. I managed to do it in just a couple of days. And if you have access to ChatGPT or even Bing AI, like the free one, it can write the code for you to do the basic example and put everything together. So yeah. Okay, all right. So I think we were just about out of time for today. Want to thank everybody for welcoming me back onto the stream. It was a nice vacation, but of course I missed all of you. And I got a little bit of like hacker interaction at that workshop that I did at the Missoula Library. So if you're ever in or around Missoula, make sure to check out their Makerspace page to see if we're doing any more events there. Like I said, we get to do a bunch of free ones and collaborate with the college there as well. So they've been really cool. And of course, I'm going to, before I forget, shout out our gracious host, Veronis. While I was out, I actually received a super nice and very, very kind gift basket from them. So I have to say, it's nice to work for a company that when you take some time off, doesn't just give you the time off, they also know why and went out of their way to make me feel cared for. So that was very kind of them. So if you want to help support the stream, oops, sorry, your stream is your question's still dangling. If you want to help support the stream, you can always go to veronis.com/Kody. That's Kody. This week, you can also check out our cybersecurity trends for 2022. This is going to, oh, sorry, someone's calling me on Signal and my phone is dead, so I can't decline it. Anyway, you can check this out. It's going to go over cybersecurity trends for 2024. This is going to be happening on Wednesday, December 14th. Looks like it actually just happened since it's Eastern Standard Time, but check it out on the record. So that's all we have for this episode. We will see you on Friday for our episode covering news, where we're going to talk about all the cybersecurity news that's happened this week. We're going to talk about things that you should know, probably a little bit about the OpenAI drama as well. So look forward to that. And yeah, we will see you then. Goodbye, everyone.